this is all good. Everyone can hear me fine? Well, good afternoon. I hope everyone's stayed awake after lunch. As introduced, I'm a technologist, so you're going to get a little bit of a technologist view of the world today, looking at certainly near-term and maybe some potential long-term threats that are coming to the port security industry. I will kind of caveat a little bit. My focus is generally on the Department of War, so we would do a lot of work supporting Department of War in things like artificial intelligence, cybersecurity. You know, we happen to train all the defensive and offensive cyber folks that actually go do this job for real. So we have some interesting insights of what's changing and what's static, and certainly around things like SOC, Secure Operations Centers. So I'll cover some of that. My three main areas are going to be on converged IT/OT SOCs and what that means, I think, for port security going forward. I'm going to cover a little bit about drones, since it seems to be a topic number one of the discussion so far, and then a little about the impact of AI on both the cyber and the drone industry, and what does that mean for security. So with that, I'm going to, I think it was mentioned earlier on, talk a little bit about the convergence of IT and OT, so operational and information technologies. There was a comment earlier on about, you know, in an ideal world, we want to separate operational technologies from the IT infrastructure so they're protected and guarded. I think you see now there's malware capable of breaking into a completely air-gapped environment. So, you know, if your OT technologies aren't connected to a SOC and aren't being monitored, you never quite know when you've been breached until something happens. You know, that system could have been compromised a while ago, and if you don't have high-level visibility of what's happening in there. So I'm a strong believer you need to converge both the IT and the OT side of the industries together and really manage that into a central SOC. Hopefully that SOC is automated, because as you'll see in a few slides, the impact of AI means now the threat isn't taking 6 months to evolve. It can evolve in a matter of days or even hours to a certain extent. And then from a business perspective, obviously converging the IT, OT SOCs into a single place, you're very much, you have a single pane of glass that you can see the performance of all the technologies within the area. So I'm going to start off this with my hypothesis. Obviously, there's a few folks that actually do this for a living here. So, but I do think, you know, that the convergence of both the IT and the OT side of the business is inevitable. Even with new technologies coming out, the Internet of Things, you know, every device that you buy that has a sensor in it is going to want to communicate with external or internal technologies. For those, I should maybe start with this, just to delineate the difference. IT is traditional IT, you know, your business management, business applications, corporate systems, generally relatively well understood enterprise level of how you manage IT assets within an organization. OT is very much the things that make the ports move, yeah, the industrial control systems, the SCADA systems, safety is paramount. These tend to move a lot slower from an upgrade perspective, expensive, and they need to work 24/7 in order to do their job. These two communities generally have not worked well together or talked. They have very different idea of pace, very different idea of level of risk they're willing to accept. But as I said in my first slide, I think very much these two worlds are now colliding, and we need to be able to manage the risks that one injects in the other. Converging, you know, from an IT/OT perspective, if you converge, you know, you completely erase the traditional air gap that we've relied on, which now means that, you know, a breach in your IT system can actually mean a breach in your crane control system, in your SCADA systems, or even, you know, fuel pipelines or fuel flow controls. And when what we're seeing, you know, doing a little bit of research before this talk, you know, nearly half the attacks that occur on OT assets originate from compromised IT systems. So, you know, a phishing email sent to your boss can have a direct impact on, you know, the ability for the port to operate in a safe and efficient manner. So, you know, we're seeing a lot of phishing emails targeting an administrative users, so HR or finance maybe not you know, the highest protected IT asset, but that can now transverse port boundaries and actually affect into an OT system. So someone can damage your port operations through something as simple as a phishing email, and we're seeing that recently. You know, a digital breach now, what I'm finding interesting in the technology world is the digital world is having a direct impact on the physical world. You're seeing that now with conflicts around the world, certainly Ukraine. software and hardware is merging together in order to turn drones around very quickly. The old timelines of 2 years, 3 years for technology to kind of start in someone's head and make it onto a battlefield, we're now seeing in 3 to 6 weeks. And you're seeing the same as well in the IT world. Very much the ability to turn digital information and actually have real-world physical impacts. So a traditional breach might look something like a phishing email that targets a corporate executive. That malware opens up, someone maybe clicks a link, a piece of malware gets installed. That malware now is adept at traversing multiple networks and moving away from the IT infrastructure and maybe starting to penetrate the OT infrastructure. And then have someone almost in control of your crane operations, your port operations through that breach in the original IT system. The other challenge we have within the OT space is, some of these systems are legacy. They've been around for 10 years. I think someone said earlier on, Windows XP is running on certain ships. That technology is no longer supported. It's vulnerable. If you're running Windows XP anywhere, there are plenty of exploits that can get you in, take control of that box, and almost be invisible on the network. So very much, how do you maintain control of and patch in a regular enough way so that your systems are secure? Because vulnerabilities are out there. When they're published, they've already been around for a year or two. We're certainly seeing state and criminal organizations sitting on exploits, which enables them to breeze through systems very easily. It's hard to put an antivirus on a crane. That's something that most crane OT systems can't support. So again, trying to manage this OT challenge the way you would manage an IT system. But something that is unpatched is a vulnerability. So it's actually just leaving the door open if you haven't patched the SCADA controls on a device for the last couple of years, because that vulnerability will be out. Folks will know it. Certainly against state-sponsored, they're very adept at taking SCADA controls, opening them up, working out exactly how they tick. And if you think you're secure, you might not necessarily be. And a great example of that is a few years ago on the Iranian centrifuges. That was a completely air-gapped system, and yet we were able to destroy the centrifuges through a very interesting penetration. Like 5 people on Earth knew how those centrifuges worked, and yet they were somehow still able to breach across a complete air-gapped environment into a physical piece of security, and then run it hard enough so you actually damage the equipment. Pull a couple of real-world examples up, so it's just not a technologist standing up saying this is real bad, help. We've seen back in 23 2 examples of this exact chain of events occurring where an IT system was breached, generally through a phishing email, had actually shut down the port. So back in Japan, a ransomware attack shut down 10% of Japan's entire national trade volume. So a simple phishing email that led to a chain of events that meant your software was held to your data was held to ransom. Obviously, you want to disconnect everything under that event because you don't want the ransomware to be spreading across your network and just crippling the problem. Led to a shutdown that, say, stopped 10% of Japan's trade volume. I don't know the dollar numbers associated with that, but I expect it's definitely within the billions. And then same with Australia. They actually, from the Secure Operations Center, they actually kind of caught this in progress, so it wasn't even a fully implemented cyber attack, but it still shut down 40% of Australia's container industry for several days as they trying to resolve the vulnerability, patch, and fix it. So beyond simple disruption, it's not just about taking out systems. We're seeing some some novel, more criminal techniques, so rerouting shipping containers from location to location. There was a report that came out yesterday about one of the new criminal enterprises is able to infect the system, take control over the delivery schedule of a container, get that container shipped somewhere else, and then you never get updates on where your real container is. So the actual owner of the container might be unaware for a few weeks where their container really is when it's been shipped off, changed, robbed, and we're seeing that almost real time come out. So other than just container theft, you can do some interesting things around altering metrics on vessels. So you can actually compromise a ship by altering the weight that it thinks it's carrying and where it's capturing. And then, as I said, just controlling pipeline pressure systems to cause catastrophic failure. So we're seeing this on a daily basis. It's interesting, I think one of the comments this morning was, Port Miami maybe sees a cyber attack every 69 seconds. As a DoD contractor, we see about 1 million a day. So, we see port scans all the way to phishing attempts, all the way to intrusion attempts. We're currently fending off internally about 1 million events a day. So, the scale is actually pretty harsh when you look at it. I guess you shouldn't do cyber training as a job because that makes you a bit of a target. If you think the problem's bad now, I will say the problem's getting much worse, certainly with the ability for AI. So again, one of the comments earlier on was about training is a good way to keep up. Everyone sat through their anti-phishing training, how to spot a suspect email, how to respond to it. Don't click on these links because it's clearly bad spelling. Those days have gone, and we're seeing even attacks as sophisticated as you get a video call from your CEO, looks and acts and responds realistically, tells you to wire some money from A to B. It's very hard now to tell with the generative AI, the use of videos or even calls or text messages. They all sound like you, they'll act like you. Very much, very highly sophisticated phishing techniques. But these software solutions are available to everyone. You can go on and download through, say, ChatGPT or Gemini, some of the tools and make your own videos. Just upload a few photos, and it looks like your boss saying to give me all your money. There was I think that the one that really hit this is on the AI-generated deepfake video. Again, it's just not technology staying up there. There was a multi-million-dollar fraud done using Teams and video conferences, multiple video calls with an AI-generated avatar that persuaded someone to release a significant sum of money to a third party. From a software side, we're also seeing adaptive malware. So malware that changes once it hits the network, very much adapts to your network, understands your network, avoids detection. So it's almost like a constant fight to be able to keep up and respond to, it's not just on the breach, you understand, your threat intelligence tells you exactly what entered the network. Once it's entered the network, it can then morph and change, replicate itself to avoid detection as well as penetrate deeper into the network. That's very hard to spot and stop. So very much you need a counter AI kind of adaptive SOC to be able to deal with that kind of emerging threat in order to track it, see anomalies on your network, and then hopefully be able to deal with it. And now we're also seeing a lot of adaptive malware from the ability to just remotely scan your network, identify where the vulnerabilities are, and then custom create code that can then penetrate your network. So, even a port open for a very short period of time, an IP port open for a very short period of time, can actually be a huge vulnerability. So AI is just not affecting the SOC world. It's very much also having a real impact on the physical world. We've had a lot of talk about drones this morning. We've been supporting a couple of organizations, certainly from the Army and some other folks, looking at both the drone issue as well as the counter-drone issue. So, how do you counter drones? Someone talked about lasers earlier on. Lasers are great until the drone is moving 60 miles an hour, 2 foot above the ground, coming at you from 4 or 5 different directions. It becomes very difficult to lase them. And you're seeing, again, a 6-week turn. So EMP or jamming a drone was a great example. Or if you saw Ukraine, they moved from radio-operated drones to fiber optic controlled drones in a matter of weeks. So that technology is evolving very quickly, empowered by AI. So we're now seeing kind of the emergence of autonomous AI on the physical assets. So you don't need a controller. It doesn't need to communicate out. You can enter a facility or infrastructure and then adapt on the fly to what it's seeing, what it's doing in order to cause maximum carnage, or even just penetrate a system and deploy another payload that might be sitting somewhere on your port infrastructure, giving away all your secrets. We're also seeing, the shift towards, in commercial space, the shift towards AI, so security camera systems. I think everyone that has one probably has, it draws a little box and gives you a little identifying mark. That system's quite easily compromised through the use of training data. You can actually make it avoid people completely, so you would be like a ghost walking through the network. Maybe putting a particular pattern on side of a container ship container. QR code for, I guess, just to visualize it, then it's suddenly invisible to AI systems monitoring that container. So, this is all doable. USF is doing some awesome research looking at how easy it is to pollute data, as well as be able to understand and track what that pollution looks like, so you can actually trust the AI systems you're deploying. And then autonomous drone swarms, as said earlier on. We're now seeing operationally, and a lot of this technology is now open source, the ability to be a remote operate and in a heavily denied environment, be able to have those drones detect, track, and engage targets fully autonomously on a drone platform. So you could send a number of these out to go do this, and they support each other, they communicate with each other, and they're able to cause maximum destruction where needed. We're seeing that technology in the battlefield, but anyone can go out and build a $500 drone. Anyone can download from Hugging Face a simple AI algorithm, code it yourself, and probably have it up and operational in about a week, 2 weeks. So this technology is not just limited now to military, it's also criminal, as well as anarchist-type movements are doing that. And then, again, from Ukraine, we saw an example of, if you really wanted to take out critical infrastructure, there was an Operation Spiderweb, I think someone, again, referred to earlier on. So that was a shipping container full of about 20 drones. They shipped 200 miles deep into enemy territory. The container opened up, the drones launched, and then destroyed a number of oil refineries. Completely undetectable, completely unexpected, that far deep. You can imagine a drone carrying a container ship from China coming over with drones in the back, opening up and doing a critical port infrastructure. You probably have about 2-3 minutes notice before any damage was done and the chance to respond. So the drone threat is definitely coming. Air threats are a large one, but we're seeing a lot of surface vessels as well as submersible vessels, pretty much all the rage now. And again, learning lessons from operational conflicts in Ukraine, pulling those in and seeing exactly how vulnerable we can be when it comes to those kind of ports. So back to what can we do about it? Very much our approach has been to converge and then add intelligence into the secure operations center kind of concept. So now you have a single attack surface for this IT/OT convergence, but you also have a single pane of glass, a single response cell that's able to deal with attacks across both vectors. And it gives you visibility as an organization exactly across all your systems. So again, it's no good having an air-gapped system that could be vulnerable, hasn't been patched for 2 years, and someone's exploiting if you have no access and be able to see that. You need a full visibility across the network. And we often find, as in all these things, that the challenge really isn't on the technology side. The technology is moving very quick. It's definitely on the cultural side. Those in the IT business, those in the OT business have very different priorities, very different risk tolerances, as well as very different concept of uptime and patch. So trying to also conflate the cultural side as well, put joint governance in, joint training. You should be, I think, if you're an OT person, you should be aware of the IT side of the house as well as IT be aware of the OT, so that you can respond as a team when issues come up. And on the drone defense, again, we've heard a couple of things, but a good thing against a drone is another drone. You're kind of in the same arms race at that point. So defensive drone operations, you actually have a benefit as well. Drones can cover a much larger area than a patrol. But those drones can also be trained to detect other drones and give you an early response. Worst case, they can suicide themselves into a drone, fly, and at least try and disrupt. That's a fairly easy thing to be able to kind of control. So even if you're not allowed to engage with EMP or lasers or kinetic weapons, you might have a drone kind of patrol that actually then, when it identifies a drone not in its network, takes it out, flies into it and takes it out. So definitely an interesting area to see. Again, this technology is moving very quick. And I think I'll stop there, and I left 8 minutes for questions. So a little bit of a race through, but hopefully it gives you the view from the technologist where we're at.
We on now? There we go. Okay, so I'll give you one from the audience. The human remains the greatest vulnerability in IT. considering the merging of IT and OT, as you talked about, how do we better mitigate human failure in IT security to prevent that crossover into catastrophic OT effects?
Yeah, definitely the human's the most, in any system, the human's the most vulnerable part. I think, the bare basics to do is training, at least make people aware. The idea of the SOC side kind of gives you a monitoring facility. So if someone does click on a phishing email, you need to be able to track that email's done. Someone installs a new patch on an OT piece of system, you need to be able to monitor and understand that's been done correctly. So I think you still need checks and balances when you do you can't just rely on training. You just can't rely on everyone being, smart. Everyone has busy day jobs. It's easy to get distracted, and it only takes one malicious link to enter your network, and you can undo everything. So I think you have to do everything. You have to train folks. You have to continuously stay up, conduct exercises, but then you also need a monitoring capacity that can give you insight across the whole IT/OT space. It's expensive, it's not the cheapest thing you ever do, but that gives you a fallback option. And then the third one is you need a backup. If someone puts ransomware on your network, you can't be down for 5 days. You've got to be able to back up and respond within, hopefully hours to be able to do that. And again, there are technologies out there that can help with this. But yeah, you have to mitigate the human, unfortunately. We all make mistakes.
Okay, another one. It seemed that surface and submersible drones have as much, if not more, impact against port infrastructure. Yet, we seem to talk more about aerial drones. Are there different considerations and defenses to consider when looking at USVs and UUVs?
Yeah, unless you're going to deploy sonar buoys across all your port infrastructure, I think that the detection of, the reason submersibles are so popular, the detection of submersibles is, pretty difficult. Air vehicles you can see coming, at least to a certain extent, but the submersibles, could be sitting at the bottom of your port for 5-6 days if you're not tracking, ready to kind of engage. So, again, we're seeing, out of the Ukrainian takedown of the Black Sea fleet, some of those vessels have been there for a while, just waiting for their moment. They're almost like remote operated mines. And so you can infiltrate a port with a USV, and then wait for the time to strike. They generally have to be a lot more autonomous as well, so because obviously communicating when you're on the seabed is a little bit more tricky. So that, that's another thought. But yeah, you need to you almost deploy sonar buoys out, or at least some kind of cheap network just to, control above the sea as well as below the sea when it comes to port security.
Next question from the audience. As AI becomes embedded in threat detection, how do you ensure explainability and trust in automated response systems used for port or critical infrastructure defense? Yeah,
funny you should say that. So yeah, we've just started working with USF on a AI trust partnership, very much looking at how do you certify systems so they've probably not been poisoned. It's very hard for us to all go out and collect source data, train our own large language model. I'm sure we don't have large data centers just pull aside for that. So we're all reliant on third-party technology. But there's definitely a need to be able to look at guardrails, look at how the LLM responds, and again, you almost need to run AI in a ML ops kind of part of the SOC needs to be monitoring AI usage, AI responses, just to make sure that again it's easy-ish to prompt inject and get things out that should never breach that area. So I think as AI becomes more integrated into everything we do, it just adds another vector of attack, another vector of manipulation into your networks or into your people. It's relatively easy to influence someone to do something now with a good prompt injection on a large language model. So you're going to be human engineered, now you're going to be AI engineered. So, rather than targeted phishing attempts at 3 or 4 of you in an organization, they can hit everyone in an organization with a good use of AI. So, yeah, difficult.
You just hit up a third party, a question that came in. How does a port protect itself from cyber compromises of contractors or other third-party entities that work with this port?
Yeah, you need to trust your SOC and your IT security folks. So, yeah, I definitely, as third parties come in and come out, there's definitely a debate on do you do your SOC internally or externally. Some great organizations out there that can provide SOCs. We happen to be one of them. But you need to be able to embed your secure operations center, and then as third-party vendors come in, you know, you understand the network, so you can see any change on the network, and then literally track every single delta or anomaly you see on the network, track it down, because it could be very benign or it could be a catastrophic risk.
Stu, you've used the word SOC a couple of times,
Yeah.
but some people in the audience may not know exactly.
Secure Operations Center. So imagine a rapid response cell, but from an IT, OT perspective, sitting in a room, monitoring the networks. You know, we use a lot of anomaly detection, so, you know, steady state, what's different. You know, if there's a sudden spike in egress of traffic, it's probably something you want to look at. You know, if someone's trying to be clever and just, you know, egresses traffic in small bits. So yeah, Secure Operations Center will still, you know, understand the network, dashboards, and monitor the network, so you can understand the vulnerability of your whole IT and OT infrastructure in real time.
Let's take time for one more question. Right. So do you help red team the physical sides of these attacks? We have mentioned Ukraine a lot in today's discussions. If you look at the physical changes they have implemented in their routes on their manned platforms or command elements, how applicable are these changes to our port security?
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot of technology from that theater, a lot of concepts from that theater make it back into the civil world pretty quick. Yeah, very much. You know, Ukraine's an example of when you kind of unleash, you know, both the cyber and the real world effects, and you know, you actually getting this. You know, we've not really had a conflict like that where we're seeing almost real time threats emerge, get dealt with. You know, a new threat emerges, gets dealt with. A new threat emerges, gets dealt with. So I think, you know, the metric I took from Ukraine was 6 weeks from developing a technology to it being countered on the battlefield. So, you know, part of my worry is, you know, how as a country do we get to a point where we can respond to threats within 6 weeks, ideally less than that. You know, a new threat comes in, deal with it, communicate that out, move on to the next threat, because it's just, the pace is just going to pick up. With that, I'm done. Thank you. No, good, yeah. Interesting, I'd say this is our first foray into port security, so it's the first one, I guess that's a good timing. Certainly interested to talk to people, get good ideas. I'm happy to act as a sounding board as well. If you do have any questions afterwards, I'll just be sitting over there. So thank you very much.